I still remember the heat of that afternoon's sun pressing against the airport windows as I stood there, exhausted but excited, waiting for my car to arrive. My clothes were wrinkled from the 10-hour flight, my eyes were burning from barely sleeping, but my heart was racing with the thrill of what had just happened. I had spent the past week overseas negotiating the biggest deal of my career, a $12 million partnership that could reshape our entire department's future. And I had done it all alone, with no support team, no backup, and barely any communication from headquarters. It had been intense, stressful, and honestly a little scary at times, but I pulled it off. I was proud. I felt unstoppable. I felt useful. Necessary. I had no idea that while I was shaking hands with executives in a glass conference room across the world, my own company was drafting the email that would make my stomach fall through the floor. My phone vibrated in my hand as I walked toward the exit. At first, I thought it might be a message from the clients congratulating me, or maybe my boss saying great job, or at least something that suggested the company finally appreciated the nights I spent awake preparing for this trip. But when I saw the sender, my fingers froze. It was from HR. The subject line was short. Too short. Update to your position. My smile faded. I stopped walking right in the middle of the airport hallway as people brushed past me with their luggage. The air suddenly felt heavier, thicker, like it was pushing back against my lungs. I opened the email with a strange mix of curiosity and dread, still telling myself it was probably just a routine notice. But the moment my eyes hit the first line, my body went numb. Your role has been reviewed and determined to be no longer necessary. I blinked twice, thinking maybe I had misread it. Maybe my screen had glitched. Maybe the jet lag was messing with my brain. But no, the words were still there, cruel and cold, with no apology, no gratitude, no explanation. Just a corporate sentence dropped like a stone into my chest. I felt my heartbeat slowing down and speeding up at the same time. My hands started shaking. The deal documents were still in my bag, neatly organized, proof that I had just secured $12 million for the same company that had decided I wasn't needed anymore. I kept rereading the line, hoping it would change. No longer necessary. My taxi driver called out my name, holding up a sign, but I could barely respond. The noise of the airport faded into a blurry echo as I replayed every late night I worked, every weekend I sacrificed, every family event I missed because the company needed me. Suddenly none of it mattered. Suddenly I was replaceable, disposable, a line item they could delete with a click. I climbed into the back seat of the car in silence, still gripping the phone like it might offer me a different answer if I held it long enough. My mind kept racing through possibilities. Was this a mistake? Was it automated? Did my boss even know? Did they wait for me to finish the deal before cutting me loose? The taxi pulled onto the highway, and the city lights blurred past the windows as I tried to breathe normally. I thought about calling my boss, but the fear of what he might say, what he might confirm, froze my throat. So I refreshed the email again, hoping maybe a follow-up message would appear. Nothing. Just the same cold conclusion. My job didn't matter anymore. But the timing didn't make sense. If they were going to do this, why send me across the world to negotiate the biggest contract of the year? Why let me represent the company if they were planning to remove me? Why not tell me before I left? Unless this was part of the plan. That thought hit me, so hard I felt it in my chest. The deal, the timing, the silence from leadership during my entire trip. It all clicked together in a way that made my skin crawl. The company wanted the contract, not the person who brought it in. And suddenly, everything around me felt wrong. The hum of the car, the dimming sky, the phone still glowing in my hand. I felt like I had stepped into a different reality, one where all my effort and loyalty meant nothing. I leaned back in the seat, staring at the email again, and for the first time in years, I didn't know what to do next. Should I confront them? Should I walk away? Should I tell the clients what happened? Should I fight back? 1,000 questions spun through my mind, but they all stopped the moment another notification popped up on my screen. This time, it wasn't from HR. It was from my boss. And the preview text made my blood run cold. We need to talk about the deal immediately. I opened the message, and what I saw inside changed everything. My understanding of the company, my role, and even the future of that $12 million agreement. Because it turned out, the deal wasn't the only thing they were hiding from me. And what came next would decide whether I walked away quietly or whether I exposed everything they'd done. The message ended with one chilling sentence, one that made me forget how to breathe altogether. "We didn't expect you to return with the contract signed." I stared at the screen, heart pounding, breath stuck in my throat, realizing that nothing about this situation was what I thought it was. And that's when I understood. Something bigger was happening behind my back. Something I wasn't supposed to know. And the truth was just beginning to show its face. I felt the taxi slow down as it approached the bridge that led into the city, but everything inside me was speeding up. My boss's message kept replaying in my head, and each time I read it, the meaning twisted a little deeper, like a knot tightening in my chest. They didn't expect me to return with the contract signed. What was that supposed to mean? Why send me on a trip they didn't believe I'd succeed in? Or worse, why send me at all if they didn't even want the deal closed? My thoughts kept circling, sharp and restless, refusing to settle. I stared at the message again, reading the words slowly this time, trying to find something I missed, something that would explain the strange tone. But there was nothing helpful. No details, no clarity, just those vague words that felt more like a warning than an update. I locked the screen and let my phone rest on my leg, but even that didn't calm me. My fingers kept tapping nervously, my mind still stuck on that night before the trip. I remembered sitting in my office, packing my documents, when my boss passed by. He gave me a short nod, barely meeting my eyes. At the time, I thought he was stressed or distracted. But now, thinking back, it felt different. He wasn't just distant. He was uneasy. And then there was that strange comment he made 2 days before my flight. "Let's hope the overseas team doesn't give you a hard time." He said it lightly, like a joke, but there had been something off in his voice. Something tight, like he was hinting at something but couldn't say it out loud. I brushed it off then. But now I felt connected to everything unraveling in front of me. The taxi stopped at a red light, and the world outside the window looked blurry from the motion in my tired eyes. People were crossing the street, laughing, carrying shopping bags, living normal lives. Meanwhile, I felt like my own life had been flipped upside down in the span of a single email. It was strange how fast things could change. One moment you're closing a $12 million deal, and the next, your job is gone. No longer necessary. Those words echoed again, and I felt that sting of disbelief all over. I dedicated years to that company. I had stayed when others left. I took on projects no one wanted. I traveled last minute whenever they needed me. I learned their systems better than the people who created them. I wasn't just doing my job. I was holding things together. So how was my role suddenly unnecessary? Something about the timing felt too clean, too organized, like it wasn't a coincidence. Almost like it had been planned. My phone buzzed again, jolting me out of my thoughts. For a second, fear rushed through me. Another message from HR, another cold line telling me something else was being taken away. But when I looked down, I saw it was a message from one of my closest colleagues, Ava. "Hey, are you back yet? Call me ASAP. It's urgent." My stomach tightened. Ava was never the dramatic type. She didn't use urgent unless she meant it. I called her right away, and she picked up almost instantly. "Where are you?" she asked, skipping past any greeting. Her voice was low and tense, like she didn't want someone nearby to hear her. "In a taxi. Just left the airport." "Why? What's going on?" She let out a shaky breath. "There's something you need to know. Something big. And it's about your trip." My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "Ava, what happened?" She hesitated, and I could almost see her biting her lip, debating how much to tell me over the phone. "I can't say everything right now, but listen carefully. Your role being removed, it wasn't random. And it wasn't sudden either." "What do you mean?" I whispered, leaning forward in my seat as if it would help me hear her better. "They've been having closed-door meetings about restructuring for weeks. But that's not the part you need to worry about." She paused again, and I heard the nervous shuffle of papers on her desk. "Your name came up in almost every meeting. And not in a good way." My chest tightened. "Why? What did they say?" "I don't know all the details, but I know your trip was discussed. More than once." She swallowed hard. "Someone higher up didn't want you going. And when you were already on the plane, they said something like, 'Well, at least this will settle things.'" I didn't understand it then. But now with that email, her voice cracked. Something is wrong, and I don't know how deep it goes. I felt a cold shiver crawl down my spine. It was one thing to suspect something. It was another to hear from someone inside. Someone who wasn't supposed to know anything. Someone who sounded genuinely scared. "Ava," I said quietly, "am I in some kind of trouble?" "I don't think trouble is the right word," she whispered. "I think you were set up." The light outside the car turned green, and the taxi started moving again, but my entire world felt like it had stopped. The idea that someone inside the company might have planned this, planned the timing, planned the removal, maybe even planned the trip, sent a sharp chill through me. "Who?" I asked. "Who would do something like that?" "I don't know," she said quickly. "But there's more. And this part, I need you to be careful with." My heart was pounding so loudly I could barely hear her. "Tell me." She lowered her voice even further. "There's a rumor going around that the overseas team didn't want to sign with us. They were supposed to reject the offer. They were supposed to stall the negotiation." I froze. "What?" "Someone here told them to." My hand clenched around the phone. "That makes no sense." They were excited. They agreed almost immediately. "I know," she said. "That's why everyone here was shocked when word came in that you got the signatures. People weren't supposed to know yet, but it leaked somehow. And the moment they heard you closed the $12 million deal, everything changed. Meetings. Emails. Tension." She took a deep breath. "Someone didn't want that deal to happen. And now they're panicking because you made it happen." I stared at the back of the driver's seat, my mind spiraling as the pieces fell into place. The cold reactions before my trip. The strange silence during the negotiations. The email waiting for me the moment I landed. My boss saying they didn't expect me to return with the contract signed. It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't coincidence. It was intentional. "Ava," I whispered, "why would they want the deal to fail? It's $12 million. "That's what I don't understand," she replied. "But whatever the reason is, it's connected to you losing your job." I leaned back, feeling the weight of her words sink into me. My breathing felt shallow, almost forced. "Listen," Ava said softly, "I'm working on finding more. But be careful. Someone is watching what gets shared. Don't send emails. Don't message anyone from your company. And don't go to the office yet." "What am I supposed to do then?" She hesitated, then said quietly, "Figure out who benefits from making you disappear." The call ended, leaving me alone with a silence that felt heavier than the airport behind me. I slipped my phone back into my pocket, staring out the window as buildings passed by like ghosts. Something dark was happening inside the company. Something I had accidentally stepped right into by doing my job too well. And now, I wasn't sure who I could trust, except for one thing. I needed answers, even if the truth was the last thing they wanted me to find. The taxi pulled into my street just as the sun was beginning to set, washing the buildings in a soft orange glow. On any other day, I would have found the scene calming, almost peaceful. But today, everything around me felt distant and unreal, like I was watching my own life from the outside. I paid the driver, stepped out with my suitcase, and stood still for a moment, letting the air settle around me. I kept replaying Ava's words, trying to make sense of them, but every thought led to more confusion instead of clarity. Inside my apartment, I dropped my bags by the door and sank onto the couch. Normally, after a long business trip, I'd feel relief being home, my own space, my own routine, my own bed calling my name. But now, the silence felt heavy. It made me too aware of everything unsaid, everything unanswered. My phone sat on the coffee table, its screen dark, but it felt like it was staring at me, daring me to open it again and see what other messages might appear. I leaned forward, rested my elbows on my knees, and forced myself to slow down. I needed to think. I needed to understand what was happening instead of letting panic lead me. But the more I tried to sort through the details, the more tangled everything became. Why would someone want the $12 million deal to fail? Who inside the company benefited from sabotaging something that valuable? And why target me specifically? Was it because I was close to someone? Because I knew too much? Or was I simply the easiest person to push out? I thought about the people in those closed-door meetings Ava mentioned. I could imagine the executives sitting around the long mahogany table, voices low, papers spread out, discussing restructuring like it was a simple budgeting adjustment. But if they talked about me in almost every meeting, like Ava said, it wasn't just restructuring. It was targeted, deliberate. My mind circled back to my boss. His message still sat in my inbox, unread except for the preview. "We didn't expect you to return with the contract signed." That line felt like a crack in the company's polished surface. Something slipped through by mistake. He must have sent it in a rush, or maybe he assumed I'd accept it without question. But I wasn't going to let it go. Not when everything felt this wrong. I unlocked my phone again and opened our last text conversation from before the trip. His messages were short, stiff, businesslike. But something else stood out when I read them now. He had avoided giving me any real instructions. He kept everything vague, almost like he didn't want to take responsibility for sending me overseas. He didn't even ask for regular updates like he usually did. It was as if he wanted distance. Or maybe he didn't want to be tied to the outcome. I scrolled further up and stopped at a conversation from weeks ago. It was from Marcus, another senior manager. He was always polite, too polite in a way that felt practiced. He had congratulated me on winning the pitch that led to this overseas trip. He even said something like, "This deal will define your future here." At the time, I took it as encouragement, but now it read differently, like a warning disguised as support. My chest tightened. What if multiple people knew about the plan? What if the entire department was involved? I stood up and began pacing the living room. The walls felt too close, my thoughts too loud. Every little detail I remembered from the past month suddenly took on new meaning. The canceled team meetings, the sudden budget freeze, the CFO avoiding eye contact with me in the hallway, even the IT team updating my devices without explanation. Were they preparing for something? Or was I just imagining connections because I was scared? But Ava wasn't the type to exaggerate. She wouldn't risk her own job to warn me unless she was certain something was wrong. A soft chime broke through my thoughts, another message. My heart skipped, and I grabbed the phone quickly, hoping it wasn't more bad news. This time it was from the overseas team. The lead executive, Daniel, had sent me a short text. "Let me know when you're settled. There's something important we didn't get to discuss. Not about the contract, about your company." I froze. Another person. Another clue. Another piece of the puzzle pointing to the same truth. Something was deeply wrong, and everyone except me seemed to have known pieces of it. I typed back quickly, saying I was home now and available to talk. But there was no response. Not immediately. Instead, the message stayed on delivered, leaving me staring at the screen with restless nerves. I sat back down and tried to calm myself, but my head kept spinning. If the overseas team had something to say too, that meant the issue wasn't just internal. It extended beyond the office walls. Maybe they noticed something suspicious. Maybe they were warned about me. Maybe they heard something from the executives who tried to make them stall the negotiation. The thought made my stomach twist. For a moment, I wondered if I should ever refuse the trip. Maybe there had been signs. Maybe the company had pushed it too suddenly. Maybe they wanted me out of the country while they made changes inside. Maybe my absence made their plan easier. I rubbed my temples. I needed rest, but my mind refused to let go. I got up and walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood there quietly, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. It was strange how ordinary sounds suddenly felt sharper, like everything around me was watching. I kept thinking about Ava's warning not to go back to the office. If things were really that tense, then showing up unannounced might make things worse. But part of me wanted to walk in anyway, to look everyone in the eyes and see who avoided mine, to see who whispered behind closed doors, to see if my badge still worked. But I pushed the thought away. Not yet. I needed more information first. My phone buzzed again. This time it was an email. Not from HR. Not from my boss. Not from the overseas team. It was from Marcus. The subject line made my pulse jump. "Need to clarify something about your trip." I opened it slowly, almost afraid of what I'd find inside. The email was short, too short, and every sentence felt carefully controlled. "I heard you returned earlier than expected. We should talk about the situation with the contract. There are details you may not be aware of. Please avoid discussing this with anyone else in the department for now. Avoid discussing this. For now." That felt like more than a request. It felt like a warning. Or a threat. I read it twice, then 3 times. Why would Marcus want the conversation private? Why not loop in my boss? Why not schedule a meeting with HR if they truly had concerns? And why did he assume I was unaware of certain details? Was he referring to the sabotage Ava mentioned? Or something bigger? I put my phone down, my hands trembling slightly. Every direction I turned revealed another shadow, another twist, another reason not to trust the people I had worked with for years. And just when I thought the tension couldn't stretch any tighter, my phone rang again, this time with an international number. It was Daniel. I answered immediately, my voice tight. Hello. His tone was serious, nothing like the confident executive I knew. I don't have much time, but you need to listen carefully. What I'm about to tell you, it's something your company never meant for you to find out. I swallowed hard. What is it? There was another proposal sent to us, he said quietly. A second one, from someone inside your company, and it was very different from yours. My body went cold. And the strangest part, he continued, is that this proposal required the deal to fail. My breath caught. But that's not the worst part, he said. The person who sent it, they used your name. Everything around me blurred. So before we continue, Daniel whispered, I need to know one thing. There was a long pause. Did you know someone was trying to ruin you? For a moment, I couldn't speak. Daniel's question hung in the air like a blade, sharp enough to cut through every thought in my head. I felt my fingers go numb around the phone, and it took everything in me not to let it slip from my hand. Someone used my name. Someone created a second proposal. Someone wanted the $12 million deal to collapse, and wanted it to look like I was the one behind it. The room around me started to feel smaller, like the walls were closing in. I didn't know. I finally whispered, my voice barely holding steady. Daniel, I swear I didn't know anything about that. He exhaled softly, like he had been expecting that answer but still needed to hear it from me. I believe you, he said, but that doesn't change the fact that someone inside your company tried to manipulate this deal. And they tried to pin it on you. I shut my eyes, feeling the weight of his words settle into my chest. It was one thing to suspect sabotage. It was another to hear someone confirmed it. And not just anyone, someone who wasn't part of the company, someone who had no reason to lie. The silence stretched for a second before he continued. Your proposal was clear, professional, and detailed. It made sense, Daniel said. But this second proposal, it was rushed, incomplete, and it requested terms that would have forced us to reject the entire deal. It was almost like someone wanted us to lose trust in your company. I swallowed hard. When did they send it? 2 days into your trip. My breath caught. 2 days into my trip. That was the day my boss ignored my update emails. The same day the CFO suddenly called off a meeting. The same day Ava said she noticed tension in the office. Everything connected. But here's the strange part, Daniel added. The email that included the second proposal came from an internal address. But the name attached to it wasn't yours. It was someone pretending to be you. The room seemed to tilt slightly. So they forged it? Yes, Daniel replied. They used your title, your department, even your signature block. But the writing style, it wasn't you. And the urgency was odd, almost desperate. My throat felt tight. Why didn't you tell me earlier? We tried, he said. But every time we sent a message to your company to clarify, someone else intercepted it. And when we requested a direct conversation with you, your office told us you were unavailable for the rest of the trip. My eyes widened. I never heard anything about that. I was available the whole time. I know. That's what makes this worse. Someone didn't want us reaching you. Someone didn't want you knowing what was happening. The words hit like a punch. My own company had cut off communication about a proposal tied to my name. That wasn't just sabotage. That was something deeper, something darker, something planned. Daniel spoke again, voice low and cautious. And after we told them we weren't accepting the second proposal, everything changed. Suddenly, they pushed for delays. They said you were inexperienced. They said we needed to reevaluate your involvement. I sank onto the edge of the couch, every muscle in my body tight. Who said that? I can't confirm names yet, he replied. But the emails all came through your senior leadership. And if I'm reading this correctly, they wanted us to distrust you. My pulse hammered in my ears. But why? Why go this far? That's what I'm trying to understand, Daniel said gently. But it feels to me like someone inside your company is working on a different agenda, something involving power, money, or control. Something bigger than just removing your position. My mind spiraled. The restructuring, the silence, the timing, the tension, the sudden removal of my role, the attempt to force the deal to fail, the proposal written under my name, and now leadership pushing a narrative that I was the problem. It didn't feel like coincidence anymore. It felt like a strategy. Before I could respond, the call suddenly crackled, and I heard faint background noise from Daniel's side. Voices, hurried footsteps, someone speaking in a rushed tone. He lowered his voice even more. "I need to go," he whispered. "But listen to me carefully. Don't trust anything they tell you right now. Someone is trying to protect themselves by erasing you. And the contract you closed, it complicates their plan." I gripped the phone tighter. "What do I do?" He paused. "Find out who sent that second proposal. And whatever you do, do not confront anyone until you know what you're up against." The line went dead, leaving me in a silence that felt even heavier than before. I sat there, breathing slowly, trying to calm the shaking in my hands. The apartment felt colder now. The shadows in the corners looked darker. It felt like the truth was hiding just out of reach, close enough to sense but too tangled to grab. I stood and walked to the window, staring out at the city lights flickering against the dark sky. Cars passed below, people walked by unaware, living their lives normally while mine felt like it was slowly cracking open. I replayed everything in my mind. The forged proposal, Ava's warning, my boss's strange message, the HR email, the gaps in communication. They all pointed toward one thing, a deliberate move to push me out. But why use my name in the process? Why try to sabotage a major deal, one that would influence the company's performance? What could they gain from all this? Then another thought crept in, unsettling and quiet. What if the deal threatened someone's position? What if my success exposed something? What if someone inside the company stood to lose millions if the deal went through? The idea hit hard enough that I physically stepped back from the window. This wasn't just office politics. This wasn't a simple restructuring. This was deeper, layered, calculated, and someone had linked my name to the part of it they wanted to hide. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a call or a message. It was an email alert from my work account. I hesitated before opening it, but something in me pushed forward. When I tapped the screen and read the first line, my heart dropped. My access was being revoked. Effective immediately. My email, my files, my internal communication history, everything connected to my years at the company was being shut down in real time while I stood there watching the notification load. And then another alert appeared. Your company badge access has been disabled. A sharp chill traveled through me. They weren't just removing my role. They were erasing me. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating, as the truth pressed itself against my mind. Whatever was happening behind the scenes was escalating fast, faster than I expected, faster than I was ready for. And whoever was behind it wasn't slowing down. They were moving now, cutting ties, clearing traces, tightening the walls around me. Before I could process any of it, my phone vibrated once more. A new message appeared on my lock screen. "Unknown number. You need to stop digging. This isn't your fight anymore." My breath caught in my chest. Someone was watching. Someone new. And someone didn't want me to learn the truth. The tension rose so sharply it felt like the moment before a storm hits, the kind where everything is too quiet, too still, right before the sky breaks open. I backed away from the phone, my pulse racing, realizing the story wasn't just about a job anymore. Someone had turned this into a battle, and I had just stepped into the center of it without even knowing. The climax was coming, and everything around me felt like it was about to explode. The moment hung in the air as Ian watched the numbers on the screen shift again. The report he had collected, something he wasn't even supposed to see, now showed an even larger discrepancy than before. His heart pounded harder, not because he feared being caught, but because he finally understood that the problem inside the company was bigger than he imagined. The strange silence in the office felt heavier now, like the walls themselves were hiding secrets. He took a slow breath and tried to steady himself, but the tension only grew stronger. While he stared at the screen, his phone buzzed with a message from Zara. She rarely texted him during work unless something was urgent. The message was short but alarming. She said she had found something on her end too, something that didn't match the official documents she had been given. Ian read her words twice, then locked his phone and slipped it back into his pocket. It was clear now that they were both seeing pieces of the same puzzle from different angles, and whatever it wasn't a small mistake or a simple misunderstanding. It felt intentional. He walked back to his desk, trying to look normal, but inside his thoughts kept spiraling. The way his manager had acted earlier, the rushed instructions, the sudden confidential restrictions on files that were usually accessible, it all made sense now. It wasn't random. Someone was trying to hide something, and Ian and Zara had stumbled too close to it. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how deep this conflict might be. And the deeper it went, the more dangerous it could be for anyone who uncovered the truth. Meanwhile, Zara paced in a quiet hallway near the back of the building. She had downloaded a copy of the document she found, but the file wouldn't open anymore. It kept showing a corrupted data message. Her instincts told her it wasn't a glitch. Someone had removed or altered it after she looked at it, almost like they knew she had accessed it. She looked around, suddenly noticing that 2 security officers were standing closer to her department than usual. It made her nervous, but she forced herself to stay calm. She knew she had to tell Ian everything in person. Messages didn't feel safe anymore. When the 2 finally met in the parking lot after work, neither of them spoke right away. They just exchanged a look that said enough. Whatever they had found was connected. Ian glanced around, making sure no one was near, then opened his bag and showed Zara a printed copy of the figures he had saved before the system changed. Her eyes widened as she compared the numbers to what she remembered. They didn't just differ, they were completely opposite. One version showed profit, the other showed a massive loss. Something was being manipulated, and the more they compared details, the clearer it became that the truth was buried under layers of edited data. But before they could talk further, Zara noticed someone standing near the exit, watching them. She nudged Ian gently, and they both fell silent. The person didn't move, but they didn't look away either. It was enough to send chills down Ian's spine. He whispered that they should leave separately just in case. Zara agreed, but her hands trembled slightly as she unlocked her car. The stakes were rising faster than either of them had expected, and they didn't even know who was behind all of it yet. As Ian drove home, a new thought crossed his mind. What if these false numbers weren't just hiding financial issues? What if they were linked to something bigger happening inside the company, something that reached beyond their departments? The more he considered it, the more the pieces aligned in a strange, unsettling pattern. Every unexplained decision, every sudden change in leadership, every project closed without a reason, it all pointed toward a deeper motive. But the real twist came later that night when Ian received an email from an anonymous sender. The subject line was blank, and the message contained only one sentence: "You're looking in the wrong place." Attached was a screenshot of a system folder he didn't recognize. It had files with names he had never seen before, labeled with dates that didn't match any of the company's official archives. His pulse sped up, and he stared at the screen in disbelief. Someone knew he was investigating. Someone was watching him closely enough to send a warning. Instead of stopping him, the message only raised the stakes. If someone wanted to distract him, then the truth had to be more serious than he thought. He clicked on the attachment again, studying the folder path carefully. It wasn't one of their regular servers. In fact, it looked like a hidden directory no employee should have access to. Which meant one thing: someone at a higher level was involved, someone with authority and control. Ian felt the tension tighten around him like invisible hands. He knew that once he stepped deeper into this, there was no turning back. And still, he couldn't walk away from it. Zara, too, sensed that the second twist had just unfolded. An anonymous source, secret files, and a warning that hinted at something even darker beneath the surface. It wasn't just about numbers anymore. It was about intention. And intention was far more dangerous. The night grew heavier, and the suspense climbed higher as both Ian and Zara realized they were no longer just curious employees. They were now part of something that someone powerful didn't want exposed. And the closer they got to the truth, the more unpredictable the story became. The climax was approaching, and neither of them knew what waited on the other side of it. Ian barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, the anonymous message replayed in his mind. By morning, he made up his mind. He and Zara needed to confront the truth directly. They couldn't keep guessing or running from shadows. The conflict had gone too far, and the only way to end it was to face it head-on. When Zara arrived outside the office building, Ian was already waiting for her. She could tell by the look on his face that he had made a decision. After a quick exchange, they both walked inside together, acting as if it was just another workday. But inside, both of them felt the weight of every step. Everything they had discovered. Fake numbers, hidden files, sudden restrictions, strange surveillance, had led to this moment. They headed straight to the restricted department, the one they were told to avoid. The air felt heavy, and the atmosphere was oddly quiet, almost like the building was holding its breath. Ian typed in the code he had found in the anonymous message. To his shock, the door clicked open. Zara gave him a tense glance, and they stepped inside. Rows of servers lined the room, blinking with quiet rhythm. Ian inserted the small encrypted drive he had prepared, and Zara watched as a hidden directory opened on the screen. Inside were dozens of files, real financial statements, unedited logs, and confidential reports showing everything the company had been hiding. The truth was massive. The edited numbers were part of a cover-up for a failing overseas project, one that had drained the company's resources for months. Instead of reporting losses, the higher-ups had created a false profit line to protect themselves. Zara covered her mouth, stunned. Everything finally made sense. The sudden secrecy, the manipulated data, the pressure on employees to stay silent. They had all been working under a giant illusion. But the real shock came when Ian found a folder labeled with the current date. Inside was a plan to shift the blame onto lower-level employees if the truth ever came out. Their names were on the list. Ian froze, his breath catching. Zara's hands shook as she saw it too. They weren't just discovering the truth, they were targets. Before they could react, the office door opened. It was their department head, Mr. Kamal. The one who always acted calm, always smiled, always seemed too composed. Now he stood in the doorway, eyes cold, no trace of his usual friendly attitude. "I knew you two would end up here," he said quietly. "Curiosity always ruins the brave ones." Zara stepped back, but Ian stayed still. He felt a strange calm settle in him, as if everything had become clear. "So it was you," Ian said. "You covered the losses. You changed the records." Kamal sighed, almost disappointed. "Not just me, but someone had to manage things. Someone had to protect the company from collapsing. You think exposing this will save anyone?" Ian glanced at Zara, and she gave a small nod, like they both understood the same unspoken truth. They weren't here to argue. They were here to end this. Ian quietly pressed a button on his phone. The device vibrated softly. Zara realized what he had done, started a recording and backed up the files to a secure cloud. Even if someone tried to stop them now, the truth was already out. Kamal's expression changed the moment he noticed the subtle move. He stepped forward, but before he could reach them, the security alarm suddenly rang through the building. Everyone froze. Zara blinked, confused. "Did you trigger that?" she whispered. Ian shook his head. "No, I didn't." Kamal whipped around in frustration. Someone else had triggered the system. And that was the final twist. A second anonymous email arrived on Ian's phone at that exact moment. He opened it with trembling fingers. The message read, "Good. You found everything. Time to step back. We'll handle the rest." Attached was a live video feed of an emergency meeting happening on another floor. Several board members were in the room, discussing the exposed files, reacting to the evidence that had just been sent to them from an unknown internal whistleblower. Someone else had been working in the shadows long before Ian, and Zara even got involved. Someone higher, someone with more access, someone who had been waiting for the perfect moment to act. Kamal's face collapsed in fear as he realized the truth. He wasn't being protected. He was being sacrificed. Sirens echoed louder, and footsteps rushed down the hallway. Ian and Zara stepped aside as security officers stormed in, but this time they weren't there for them. They walked straight to Kamal. He didn't even argue. The look in his eyes said everything. He knew the game was over. As he was taken away, Zara let out a shaky breath. Ian finally felt the tension melting off his shoulders. They had uncovered the truth. but someone else had pulled the final trigger. The company's corruption was now exposed publicly, and the board had no choice but to take action. Still, one question lingered between them. Who was the real whistleblower? Ian looked at the final line in the anonymous message. You two were just the light we needed. It wasn't a threat. It was gratitude. And even though they didn't know who sent it, they knew their role in the story mattered. They weren't just employees anymore. They had become the turning point that forced the truth to surface. The main conflict was over. Justice had started moving, but the mystery of the unseen ally remained, an unexpected twist that neither of them would ever fully understand. And somehow, that made the ending even more powerful. For a long moment after Kamal was taken away, Ian and Zara just stood there in the quiet room, surrounded by blinking servers that now held no power over them. It felt unreal that everything they had been fighting against for weeks had finally come to the surface. The tension in the air slowly faded, replaced by an unexpected stillness. Ian finally exhaled, a deep breath that felt like it had been stuck inside him since the day he got that message overseas telling him his role was no longer necessary. Now he finally understood why everything had happened the way it did. Zara leaned against the wall, trying to process everything. Do you think the board will fix things? She asked softly. Ian looked at the screen one last time, the open files, the truth laid bare. They don't have a choice anymore, he replied. Everything's out in the open. They'll have to rebuild from scratch if they want the company to survive. They left the server room together, walking into a hallway filled with confusion, whispers, and employees trying to understand why alarms were ringing and security was everywhere. But this time, Ian and Zara didn't feel scared. They felt free. The weight that had been sitting on their shoulders had finally lifted. Within a couple of hours, emergency meetings were announced. All employees were instructed to gather in the auditorium. Ian and Zara sat together near the middle, watching board members file onto the stage. The room buzzed with tension as everyone waited for answers. A senior board member stepped forward, clearing his throat. He looked tired, defeated even, but there was a seriousness in his expression that no one had seen before. We have uncovered information indicating major misconduct within our leadership, he began. The room erupted with murmurs, but he raised a hand. An internal investigation has been initiated, and several executives have already been suspended pending further review. We want to thank the individuals who brought this to our attention. Ian felt Zara nudge him slightly, like she was silently asking, should we step forward? But he shook his head faintly. This wasn't about credit. It was about truth. And clearly, the real whistleblower wanted to stay hidden. The board member continued, we will be restructuring multiple departments, reevaluating contracts, and reviewing every overseas project to ensure transparency and ethical business practices going forward. Hearing the words, overseas project, made Ian's heart twist. That was where it all began for him, the moment he was blindsided with the news that his job was unnecessary, even while he was closing a $12 million deal. He finally understood now. His termination wasn't about performance or cost saving. It was a distraction tactic. They needed him out of the way before he discovered the missing numbers. Zara whispered, at least they know the truth now. Ian nodded, but he wasn't fully relieved yet. The meeting ended with an invitation for employees to send any concerns, data, or suspicions directly to an independent investigation team. People left the auditorium talking among themselves, some shocked, others angry, some even relieved. The atmosphere was completely different now. It felt like years of fear and doubt were finally breaking open. As they walked out, Ian's phone buzzed again. His heart tightened for a split second, remembering the anonymous messages that had led him here. He opened it carefully. This time it wasn't a warning or a clue. It was a simple message from HR. Your employment status is pending review. Please meet with us tomorrow. Zara saw the look on his face. What now? He showed her the screen, and she smiled gently. Ian, after everything you've done, they won't just take you back. They'll need you. But Ian wasn't sure. So much had changed. He'd seen the darker side of the company, things he could never unsee. He wasn't the same person who boarded that plane overseas, excited to close the biggest deal of his career. After leaving the office building, he and Zara decided to walk to a nearby cafe. They needed space to breathe, to talk about what came next. The city felt different that day, quieter, slower, almost like it knew something had shifted. Over coffee, Zara finally asked the question they'd both been avoiding. Are you going back if they offer it? Ian stared out the window for a moment. I don't know, he admitted. Part of me feels like I should, to help clean up the mess, to finish what we started. But another part of me, I just feel drained. Like I spent so much time fighting to keep my job that I forgot to ask myself whether I even wanted to stay. Zara nodded slowly. You don't owe them anything. You did what was right. That's enough. He appreciated her words more than she knew. She had stood by him through everything, even when she didn't have to. It made him realize that the people around him mattered more than the company logo on his badge. That night, Ian went home and sat alone in his apartment, reflecting on the entire journey, from the moment he felt betrayed overseas, to the mysterious messages, to discovering the corruption, to facing Kamal, to witnessing the truth finally surface. It was overwhelming, but also strangely comforting. He finally had answers. Before he went to sleep, he opened his laptop, logged into the secure cloud folder, and checked the files one last time. Every piece of evidence was still there untouched. Whoever the hidden whistleblower was, they had ensured that the truth would never be buried again. He whispered to himself, maybe this was never about saving my job. Maybe it was about finding my voice. The next morning, he went to HR as requested. The meeting was surprisingly calm. The HR manager thanked him for his cooperation and said the investigation team appreciated his contribution. She then offered him something he didn't expect, a promotion. Ian blinked in disbelief. Why me? She smiled softly. Because you didn't stay silent. Because people like you are the ones who rebuild trust. It was flattering, but as he walked out of the office afterward, he realized the answer in his heart. He didn't want the promotion. He wanted something else, peace. A fresh start. Later that afternoon, he submitted his resignation. Not in anger, not in defeat, but with clarity. He wrote that he was grateful for the opportunities, but needed a new direction. For the first time in months, he felt in control of his life. When Zara heard the news, she wasn't surprised. She simply asked, so what now? Ian smiled for the first time in a long while. Now, I think it's time to build something of my own. They walked out of the building together, leaving behind the weight of everything they'd uncovered. The company would continue its investigation, rebuild its reputation, and hopefully learn from its mistakes. Their part of the story was over. As they stepped outside, Ian's phone buzzed one final time. Another anonymous message. He opened it quickly, half expecting another twist. It simply read, well done. No signature. No hint. No explanation. Just 2 words that felt like closure. Ian looked up at the sky and felt something he hadn't felt in months come. His journey had been long, messy, stressful, and filled with unexpected turns, but in the end, he had found something far more valuable than a job. He had found truth, courage, and a new beginning. And that was enough.